News was given exclusive access to America's Space Force Command Center.
Commanders there say a constant game of intimidation is already underway in space.
NBC's Tom Costello spent 2 days with everyone from the generals down to enlisted personnel. Tom, a lot of folks may think of Space Force, conjures up images of that Steve Carell show on Netflix, but this is not a laughing matter.
No joking matter when Vladimir Putin has threatened using nuclear weapons. And just as Russian and U.S. submarines shadow each other in oceans, something similar is already playing out between our satellites in space. U.S. commanders say it's constant harassment and intimidation. And that is where America's 2-year-old Space Force comes in.
Pick up heading 270 detonator, Chinese Dragon. Those two are engaging ambush target.
In a dark simulator room at the Air Force Academy,
Following good hits, dead man.
America's next generation of fighter pilots is in the cockpit.
Ambush one.
But these future officers have a choice to make. They can stick with a career as airmen or apply to become a guardian with the brand new Space Force.
So we talk about how the warfighter is impacted by the space environment,
where the focus shifts from fighter jets to satellites. Like it or not, the reality is the battlefield is changing from planet Earth to space. This is the view of the Asian Pacific Theater. And the threat matrix in space is very different. It's congested, it's contested, and it's competitive.
Lie down.
Our cameras were the first ever allowed inside the classified Space Force Satellite Command Center, where Space Force Guardians monitor every military satellite in orbit, including the vital links to units in the field, to Air Force One, and the nuclear chain of command. While next door, the GPS Command Center watches over 37 satellites that provide free GPS coverage to the world. How accurate is the U.S. system?
Within 1.5 feet guaranteed.
1.5 feet?
Yes, sir.
Outside, under heavy guard, one of several mobile satellite command units never before photographed, ready to roll across the country should headquarters face imminent threat. The U.S. military says Russia and China are already regularly harassing, jamming, and probing U.S. commercial satellites that are critical to the U.S. economy. Satellites come in all sizes, from a school bus to a dishwasher to a cooler to the size of a loaf of bread, providing everything from internet access to university experiments, GPS, and military communications. Both Russia and China have already targeted and blown up their own satellites, creating massive orbiting debris fields.
I think they're trying to send a message that they could target somebody else's as well, and now we have to deal with the aftermath of those tests.
Space Force was created to avoid an actual shooting war in space or on the moon. General Sean Bratton, how do you determine what is a hostile act in space?
We're working through that now. We don't have that history like we do in the other domains to build upon, and so as we're encountering these threatening activities for the first time, it's forcing us to really define these terms.
This is a major threat.
A new threat environment for new Guardians and Academy cadets who are already designing and launching their own satellites. After graduating, senior Courtney Kirkpatrick will head to MIT for her master's, then Space Force.
They're creating a new culture. Everything's going to be fast-moving. The digital force, as they call it, that was really attractive to me.
As for the future, as the United States builds out a lunar presence of our own, do we need boots on the moon to protect those assets?
Well, I think that remains to be seen.
Yeah, listen to what he said. It remains to be seen whether we need boots on the moon someday. Space Force is small right now, only 14,000 military personnel, and the culture is much more like Silicon Valley. Think Apple, not Army, where you've got officers with masters and PhDs working alongside people right out of high school who are very tech savvy. So a much more collaborative environment really at every level, and that really struck me.
Yeah, well, what struck me about your story there, the Russia and China, some of what they're already doing, the harassing, the jamming, the probing.
Yeah.
Any concern that they have weapons perhaps embedded in any of their satellites?
Yeah, the Pentagon believes that Russia already does have what they call a nesting satellite, in which there are weapons inside the satellite. They've already used that to target and blow up one of their own satellites. And China has a satellite with a claw arm that can reach out and disable other countries' satellites And the fear is, of course, that those weapons could get much more sophisticated and eventually able to target the U.S. homeland. That is their concern. That's why Space Force exists.
Raises the question whether we have anything like that. But I guess that's classified,
They would not
probably.
answer. They would not answer.
That was fascinating. Thank you. Good to see you in person.